Hi, you are listening to Baachu Talk, a podcast by Baachu, trusted advisor to government. My name is Baachu and I share human leadership stories from our UK public and business services community. This special episode is to celebrate NHS birthday on the 5th of July. So before I begin, thank you NHS and thank you NHS team for everything you have done to this country. Today's guest is Karamjit Singh, CBE. Karamjit has been chair of University Hospitals of Leicester NHS Trust since 1st of September 2014. His previous experience of health leadership includes serving as the first chair of Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership NHS Trust, as well as the board membership of Coventry Family Services Health Authority and Coventry Health Authority and trustee of British Lung Foundation. Karamjit Singh's current voluntary commitments include being a trustee of a Sikh temple based in Coventry where he lives, a council member of Justice which sponsors research and advocacy for changes in the justice system. And in June 2019, he was elected by his fellow chairs to the National Board of NHS Providers, which represents all the 231 NHS acute mental health and community services trust in England. Karamjit has held many diverse roles within public services regionally, nationally during the past 40-odd years. His previous national appointments have included leading the UK-wide appeals process for social fund welfare benefits, appointing Queen's Counsel and senior civil servants, investigating police complaints and suspected miscarriages of justice, developing training for judges, taking decisions about parole for prisoners and employment law issues, regulating financial services, and the funding of political parties as well as electoral issues. He was awarded a CBE in 2000 for services to the administration of justice, and in 1990 he was awarded a one-year Harkness scholarship to study public policy in the United States. He was recently included in the Green Park National Survey as one of the 100 BAME Business Leaders. He's also a companion of the Chartered Institute of Management and a fellow of Royal Society of Arts. In 2019, NHS Improvements Trust Appointments and Approvals Committee confirmed the reappointment of Karamjit Singh, CBE, as the chair of University Hospitals of Leicester Trust until 30th September 2022. That's a mouthful, Karamjit. You have achieved so much, and I'm so looking forward to speaking with you. Welcome, Karamjit, to Baachu Talk. Great to have you with me. So, Karamjit, where were you born, and where did you school and your high school in education?
Yeah, I was born in this country and in Coventry. I still live in Coventry. I went to both primary and secondary school here in Coventry. And then I went to my local university, which happened to be Warwick University. Obviously when I was growing up, there was a very small Asian community. I mean, my parents were very early settlers in this country. My father came to this country in 1938.
Oh, wow.
He had he'd left his village in the Punjab in India.
Mm-hmm.
He had gone to East Africa, into Kenya in 1937, and moved to this country in 1938, following his cousin. And my mother, he was here during the Second World War, and then my mother, he went back to India in 1948 and returned with my mother later on that year. So they were very early migrants. In fact, my mother was probably, I think, the second or third Asian lady living in Coventry at that time.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. I mean, like second or third in Coventry. Oh my God. So when you grow up, how was it like growing up?
Yeah, it was an interesting reflection. Although, we had, because my father was one of the very early people there,
yes,
we had a significant number of people. There were obviously at that point, there were largely Punjabis, mainly Sikhs, who really came to him. So he would help them, obviously help them find jobs, help settle them down. Obviously they lived with us perhaps initially, then they'd move elsewhere. So their social relationships were very much within the Punjabi community. So that I was growing up with their families, and they were people who were largely born in India. But we also had, many English friends, because obviously, as communities, we were still a relatively small community. So, and my father, he was working in a foundry. He was a foundry worker. Clearly had a wide circle of friends.
Karamjit. So, looks like your father has been an influential person in your life. Looks like it.
Yeah, he has been, and so is my mother. But he has, and he was an individual who, I think, in a sense, I think if he'd been in another setting, I think he would have had the opportunity to make many achievements in his life. My father was only 10 months old when my grandfather died.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather died in East Africa. So my father never saw his father. His father never saw his son. And he was an only child. My grandmother said, "I'm not going to remarry." And unfortunately, she went blind from cataracts when my father was only 15. So he had a very difficult life. He left school at that age and started farming. So, and the thing he taught me was really how important relationships and values are in your life. And if I can just give you one little anecdote, just to illustrate this, because he was one of the few people in the community who could read and write in English, people would come to him very often and ask him to write his letters and so forth. So when I was 14, he said to me, "You're now going to take this job on. And I want you to remember three things when people come. The first thing is that when they come to you, you actually ask them when they come, would they like a cup of tea or water or some other refreshment before you do anything else. So you're very polite to them. The second thing he said, you always remember, is that actually you only write down what they tell you, no more and no less. And you always keep that information confidential. You don't discuss what they tell you with anyone else. And the third thing he said, I want you to remember, is that you behave with humility towards these people. They may not be able to speak English, but they have life experience. And you're just beginning your life. And if you talk to them, you understand them, you will learn, you will get insights from them about their life, which will be of use to you in the future. And I've never forgotten those lessons. It doesn't matter what position a person is in. I think how you speak to people, I think really is important.
Wow, beautifully said, Karamjit. What an inspiration within the family there. So after your schools in Warwick University, what was the first job that you took, Karamjit?
I was very lucky. There was a job that was advertised actually within Warwick University. It was a research project which was looking at the industrial relations, the relationships between workers and management in the engineering industry in the West Midlands. But what was interesting about it was that they wanted to focus on the fact that we had this was early 1970s, we had a number of people, particularly from the Asian community, who were coming into those factories. And they were really interested in the research project in understanding, what the impact was. And I think probably I happened to be the right person in the right place, because I had a number of, obviously I had the language skills. Although I was born here, I grew up in a household where we learned to speak fluent Punjabi and so forth. I think there was that. And also, I was very interested. My father, despite being in this country for all this time, had a very strong link with India. And I'd been back a number of times, so I had all that interest. And that was my first job, doing research in industrial relations. And then I became very interested. I was always very interested in people and what happened with them. And then my second job was actually there in Leicester. And I got a job as a community worker with Leicester Community Relations Council. And we had an office that was located on the Melbourne Road in Highfields.
Wow. 40 years of public services started from Leicester then, Karamjit.
Well, yes, I suppose I'd like to think that the Warwick University job is also public service, but yeah. So I've had I've had 3 roles in the Leicestershire area. Working as a community worker for nearly 3 years before I moved and got a job in the new Commission for Racial Equality in the 1970s. And that was a time when, particularly in Leicester, we were getting people who had literally just come in following the expulsion from Uganda. So, that was very seeing the early stages of the community there. My second time I was in Leicester and Leicestershire was when I was an assistant county clerk, or assistant chief executive, if you like, in Leicestershire County Council, and that was in the mid-1980s. And in between, I'd had 2 other jobs, but that was really interesting because that was about focusing on things like urban policies. That was really looking at what was happening in urban areas to communities, the deprivation, the disadvantage, and how could local government, central government, and the private sector actually invest in those areas and try and make a difference to the lives of those people. And that was a really interesting job. And then since 2014, I've been very lucky, and this is a great privilege. I was appointed to become chairman of University Hospitals of Leicester. So Leicester has been a very important part of my working life and also my social relationships.
Wow, that's isn't it? I think everything comes back together at some point, like 1970s when you started there, all the way to 2014. In between, you also took lots of other roles, in justice, and also you went to study there as well. Karamjit, can you share some of those memories as well?
Yeah, I've been, again, very lucky. Look, everything I've done, I've really responded to what I've seen in advertisements, or headhunters have approached me. I've never, no one has kind of given me any role simply by saying, do you want to take this role? I've really had to look around. And I suppose I'm one of these people who sometimes gets a little bit impatient. You do something, I find it interesting, and then if I read about something and something else that's even more interesting, I think, well, why shouldn't I have a go? So one of the things I've done, I mean, one trend in my career has been working in the justice system. So, for example, the reason I left Leicestershire County Council was because I saw an advertisement, or I was approached, I think, to apply for it by a headhunter for a commissioner with the Police Complaints Authority. Now, this was very much looking at police conduct and undertaking investigations. And for 6 years, I was a commissioner in the national body. And I was still in my 30s, so I was, still relatively young. And that was a great privilege because, you know, you're dealing with, at a senior level, with chief constables, you're dealing with, obviously, understanding about police-community relationships. So that was one area. I've been a member of the parole board for England and Wales. In that job, you are deciding on whether or not people should be released early. So it's a very responsible role. And in that role, over 3 years, you're also interviewing people in prison, you know, to make your own assessment. And I interviewed over 500 people, you know, so you learn about people and their lives and something about that. I've also been on a national body concerned with judicial training of judges, you know, deciding the programs there. And I've also been on a body which appoints Queen's Counsel, QCs. So 5 years I was on that, interviewing and selecting QCs and recommending them to the Queen for appointment. And my fifth role in that area, I was on the body, I've been a commissioner on the body that looks at whether or not someone has been unfairly convicted, and if we feel that this should go back to the Court of Appeal, referring those cases. So justice has been one part of my career. I also served for 10 years on the UK Electoral Commission. And in that role, I can tell you, I've had the privilege of attending and observing 4 elections in India. I've observed elections internationally in places like Kosovo, Sri Lanka, Zanzibar. And I was for 5 years the electoral commissioner with particular responsibility for Northern Ireland. So I've had the opportunity to kind of do and see really interesting kind of things. I think that the other area I'd probably ought to say a little bit about is that I've also been a civil service commissioner, and that means that you are responsible for chairing the selection panels for the top 3 grades in the civil service, and I did that for 5 years. So I've been very lucky, you know. And then this other area that has been very important to me is health. Health is a public service that everyone in this country can access. It's a universal health service, and I have not only been a non-executive on a health authority, but I've also been chairman of a mental health trust, in addition to the Leicester Hospital Trust, which is a very big trust. We are the 5th biggest NHS trust in the country, and we employ over 16,000 people. So we are a very big organization. So I'm, you know, I'm a person who's kind of really had the opportunity to do lots of interesting things, but they're all things I saw advertisements for, I applied for, and I would not want you to get the impression that everything I've applied for, I've received. Sometimes, you know, you apply for things and you are not lucky enough to get those roles, but you have to kind of make the effort, I think.
Is there any memories that comes out from your role as an election commissioner, or from your role, also maybe one experience, interesting memory as an election commissioner, and one experience from your trust, from healthcare, and maybe one experience from your justice that might be of interesting to our listeners?
Yeah, I think that the issue about being an election commissioner is that you know, you are dealing with a really important service, which actually is about trying to promote confidence in the voter, that this is going to be a fair process. This is going to be a process where no one else knows how you have voted, and this is going to be a process that is fair, both in terms of the way the person is able to vote in secret, but also that the results that come out in a way that is without fear or favor. Now, that is all about perceptions, but it's also about the ability to communicate in a very transparent and open way. And, I was very much struck when I observed, and I think I'll give the example of the elections I observed in India, for example. Here is India, very large country, and where there are extremes both in the urban population and rural population, extremes of education and so forth. But here's a country with nearly 900 million voters, and if you compare that with this country, the UK, we're talking of 40 plus million voters. So you're talking of at least 20 times the size of what we have here. And I was very impressed at the way they did the amount of planning. They use up to 11 million lay people. They only have a secretariat of 300 people. And the thing that amazed me was actually, I wrote an article about this. I interviewed some of these people who were in polling stations. Why do you do this? I remember one teacher who said he'd been doing this, school teacher, he'd been doing this for 40 years as a polling clerk when there were elections, because he felt it was his duty, to the public. And I was really impressed that you have that kind of sense of public duty, So, and I think the other thing that really has struck me about the Indian election process has been the use of these very simple voting machines, which are not linked to the internet or anything else. And yet the procedures are so simple that voters of whatever background can actually understand them and use it. I mean, I know there has been controversy about their use, but as far as I'm concerned, everything I've seen leads me to understand that very often the controversy seems to come from those who lose the elections rather than those who win them, and I'm not making a political point here. I'm just making that point. On the issue of health, I think that when I go around the wards in my hospital, I always make a point of talking to all the staff in that ward, from the consultant downwards, because we also have staff who work as nurses, administrators. We also have staff who are working as domestic workers, cleaners, etc. And they are, as far as I'm concerned, they're all part of one team. So my approach tends to be to talk to everyone and ask them, we are all human beings and all of us have a story within us, and I think that's really important. And I think that the other issue, I suppose, coming back to the justice issue, is that, I think what struck me very much when I was doing my interviews as a parole commissioner within prisons is that you do meet people in prison who you think actually, in terms of what's happened in their life, and I'm not condoning criminality here at all, but there are some people you meet who you can see have got mental health problems or other problems which have led them down that particular path. So you learn something about people and that you have insights about their lives.
Wow, that's very powerful. So looking back now, 45 plus years of public services, if you can say, these are my key achievements, what are some of the things that you would pick, Karamjit?
Well, I think I'm very much guided by, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, obviously was a brilliant physicist and scientist. And one of the things he said that has always kind of struck me is actually, he said, never strive to be a success, but strive to give value. And I think that, I think what's important is that I think none of us should think that actually we achieve things by ourselves. I think actually, I've been very lucky. Since 1982, I have been the most senior person from an ethnic minority background in whatever role or organization I've worked in, So I've gradually made my way up into organizations. And, I think it's really important that our younger generation has the opportunity to kind of move up and even take the opportunities that people like me have not been able to reach. And I think it's, again, I think it must be a matter of pride for all of us that we are now seeing, people from minority communities taking really high positions, whether it's in politics or elsewhere. And that's really, I think, really good. But I think that the issue, coming back to your question, for me, would be that actually, we should be trying to think about what is it we can do to make things better for people. I mean, for me, for example, and I think recognize that you have to do this working through people. You have to get people to accept the same vision that you have. And what is my vision about health? My vision about health would be that how do we reduce the health inequalities? What do I mean by that? How do we make sure that all people, no matter what their backgrounds, actually have access to health services, and actually the health services meet their needs, whatever they are, And I think that for me is what the objective would be. I think however you measure your success, I think that I would like to think that, whatever I've tried to do, has had some influence on making life better for people, because I think public service, that's what public service should be about.
That's beautiful. So tell us 3 things not many people know about you, Karamjit.
That's a very well. I enjoy watching rugby because I used to play rugby. Because obviously, growing up here, I used to play rugby when I was younger. I enjoy very much watching rugby, but I probably usually on the television rather than being able to go and watch it at a match. I think that I'm blessed. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 of whom live literally next door to me, so I see them quite a lot, and 2 lovely 6-year-old twin girls, so I really enjoy time with them. But I have 2 grandsons who I also see. But I think that, so for me, I think that particularly during the last few weeks, I've been combining my professional duties with being a home tutor as well. So, and that has been a revelation for me in terms of trying to influence 2 6-year-olds and get them to do things. Other things about me that people don't know, my late wife, she was Punjabi. She came from the Punjab. We had a very happy life together, but unfortunately ill health intervened. I think that I very much used to enjoy going back to India with her, and in fact for a decade we used to sponsor a free medical and eye camp in the village my parents came from, and that gave me a lot of personal satisfaction, that you actually can do something for other people who are less fortunate than you. I think that doing things on a voluntary basis has always been, again, something my parents have given, that you try and give something of value. And I think that's and I don't go around talking about that very much. I think that when you kind of ask questions like that, I have to kind of think of something to kind of tell you about me as a person, really, and what makes me tick.
Wow, that's very powerful. We are in COVID period now. What are the things that you have seen that reminds you that people are kind and good?
I have been really amazed by the support we've had from the local communities. You know, people of all kinds. You know, some people have made obviously very big donations, but that's because they can afford to. Even people with relatively few assets, you know, have made very modest contributions, but you know, they are the same in my eyes. Absolutely, they're the same. The fact is that outpouring of generosity, whether it's in terms of, you know, for example, our local football club giving us a very sizable check, or whether it's people, for example, you know, particularly a lot of the restaurants and other small businesses in Leicester, people coming in and providing food for our workers, or donating all sorts of other goodies which we have shared with our staff. I think that that's been amazing, that outpouring of support, and also the willingness of people to come and help and do volunteer work. That's been absolutely amazing. So I want to kind of pay tribute to all the communities who have kind of come forward. I mean, it would be unfair to just point out anyone in particular. I think the other thing that really I think has really helped has been the way staff in our hospitals have actually risen to this challenge. You know, people have worked really, really hard. Unfortunately, I say this, is that, you know, we've also had fatalities. You know, we've had people who have lost their lives, but many, many more people have come into the hospital, and we've looked after them, and we've been able to discharge them and send them back to their families. And I think that, you know, one of the great things I feel about this, this has been a very difficult time for everyone, has been the way it has brought people together. You know, there's been that feeling of sense. And I'm aware, obviously, at the moment, as you know, we've suddenly had this upsurge in cases, and obviously this announcement only last night that there is going to be a further period of quarantine. You know, I sincerely hope that this will be for as little a period as possible, and that we can obviously come back to, you know, some kind of normality in the future.
Yes, that's so true. You might have observed so many inspirational stories within your Leicester team as well. Do you have any words for them or any shout outs specifically?
I think that you know, I think that people have worked really well. Staff have worked really well in teams. They've worked really, really well. And this is people at the level of senior medical people like our consultants and nurses, you know, trainees, administration staff, but also, you know, canteen, catering, and cleaning staff. You know, people have at all levels have absolutely all worked, and they've brought a real sense of service to this. And I think that from myself and my board colleagues, we are absolutely supportive, and we really appreciate everything that they've done. And I think that we've obviously tried to do is to we've been very lucky. We have not had any shortage of equipment, you know, PPE. We've not had any shortage of masks or gowns or anything like that. We've been able to provide our workers with that all the way through. And we also have tried to support them by providing appropriate car parking and food all the way through this pandemic. What we now have to do is to restore our services, you know, our previous services, back to the position they were before. You know, we will have to have two jobs in the future. One is that we will have to guard against any increase in COVID-19 cases, and we have to make provision for that. But it's really important that people who have other illnesses and so forth and conditions they would normally come into hospital for, that we actually make sure we have all those services, all those operations, all those appointments going on as they were before. And I want to assure, both the communities out there who are listening, and equally, I think I would want to, assure our staff that has to be our next task.
You have been very busy, taking multiple roles, non-exec roles and stuff. So how did you adapt to the new normal? When this news broke out, where were you, and and how are things working for you so far?
Well, I think the new normal for us, for example, is instead of having meetings and everyone sitting in the same room and sitting next to each other, when you've got more than 5 or 6 people, and then you think of the 2-meter distancing rule, the one thing that has made such a big difference now is the way people are using communication technologies. And what do I mean? Like this, for example, we're speaking remotely to each other, but also that we're using visual means. Previously it used to be Skype. Now you have Zoom, or you have Microsoft Teams. I think that that's making a big difference. I understand that GPs are using this type of approach much more, with their patients. I understand that, obviously in the future, maybe even more outpatient clinics in hospitals will be using this. I think the new normal is going to be, the word is new. I think people will be doing things that they have not been done in the past. And in the wider economy, we know already that people in many roles have actually been working at home. And I suspect that may continue for some people, actually. So we have to kind of think about how do we adapt these new processes to provide a better quality healthcare service to our public. That is a question that we need to be thinking about from our perspective. What's
one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
Well, I think I suppose I wish I'd known this is where this would have gone, and maybe I where I've ended up, and maybe I might have decided to do this or not do this. I think the one thing I've come to learn is that nothing stays still. Nothing, remains the same. Things always change, whether they're in your life, whether they're in the environment you operate in. And I think if there's one lesson I've drawn from all this, is that you have to be flexible in what you're doing. And, the generation who came before us were flexible. Why were they flexible? Let me give you a small example. My father started his working life at the age of 15 as a farmer, and then when he first came to this country, he was a peddler, selling door to door, and then eventually he started working in a engineering company as a foundry worker. Now, the point was that he was part of a generation that didn't have many skills or education qualifications. That's why his choices were limited. But what he did have was that he wanted to do something to work for the betterment of himself and his family, And I think that being prepared to do something which you've never done before, I think is really important. I'm not saying you take risks in a rush way, but you have to kind of think that you have to be flexible. And I'm not sure, my career tells me, I don't think there is anything like a career for life, that if you start at the beginning of your career, that you're necessarily going to be doing the same thing at the end. I had no concept that I would be doing these things as my career developed. I think they just simply happened that I saw the opportunities, I saw the advertisements. Your knowledge base extends as you are working, you mature, you learn from other people, you network. All those things are very important, I think. And above all, I think it's about how you relate to people. I think another saying, if I may say so, my father used to say to me, what you say about yourself is not important. What's important is what other people say about you, actually, you know. So I think that, you know, you have to leave your sense of ego and self-importance at the door. I think when you become into a leadership position, I think one important thing you have to do is to learn to listen, actually, as well as giving instructions and so on. I think you need to understand the context in which you are working, you know, and how you get the best out of people and how you motivate them, I think is really important. And I think even in our personal lives, I think the quality of the relationships we have is really how people respond to you and what they feel, whether they feel you're being genuine or whether they feel you are, you know, in a sense, having a superficial relationship, you know. And I think these things, they apply in our personal lives, but they also apply, I think, very much in our working lives.
Wow. So what was the best year of your life and why?
Oh, I think there were quite good years. I mean, there have been years when things have been obviously challenging as well. I think it was a great privilege for me to be awarded the CBE, you know, in 2000. That was 20 years ago. It was a great privilege, I think, to be able to take my mother, who was still alive. My father had passed away by then. So to take her to Buckingham Palace and to for her to see me receive it from the Queen, I think was, you know, a very big honour for her, a very big appreciation for her. And you know, my mother was someone who, you know, grew up in a Punjabi village. And for people of her generation, particularly women at that time, she didn't have the opportunity to go to school. So, you know, she came, she was a strong woman internally in terms of her values, and she was a great support to my father. And she also raised, I'm the eldest of 7, so she raised 7 children, you know. And I think that for me, I think it was being able to see the pleasure on her face, I think was a great year for me.
That's nice. So what trait do you like the most about yourself?
I'm not sure. I think that's a question you should ask other people rather than me, I think. Well, I would like to think I'm a good listener. I would like to think that, you know. I think that because I think, you know, if you listen, then you come away, you learn something, you know, about people, about situation. I think for me, that's always been a really important trait.
That's nice. So what random stranger has had the biggest impact on your life?
You can't help but be taken with, you know, the example of someone like Nelson Mandela. And why? You know, here is a man who spends 27 years in solitary confinement, you know, for his beliefs, etc. But yet, you know, his actions, and it comes back to, you know, my interest in rugby. In the 1960s, when I used to play rugby, I was very passionate about it. And when the South African team visited here, the Springboks came to the UK to play. Of course, because of the apartheid in South Africa, they were all white. And I felt so strongly about that. I felt so strongly. It's the only time I've ever been on a demonstration, you know. But I felt really strongly about that and went on that demonstration, you know, demonstrating, you know, why they're coming here to play. And yet, you know, here was Nelson Mandela within 2 or 3 years of being released from prison, where he'd been in the solitary and confinement or doing hard labor for 27 years. And he became president of South Africa. And when they had the 1995 World Cup matches, and this is the one where South Africa won the World Cup, you know, he actually not only was there to give the cup to the South African team, but he actually went out there wearing the, you know, the sports kit for the Springboks. And this was a really big thing because it was a big emblem that was associated with, you know, rugby, which was seen as a, you know, a sport which was only undertaken by white people. So he was giving a very powerful message. And I think that his emphasis on reconciliation, his emphasis on not, you know, showing any vengeful signs against the people who had kind of obviously put him away in prison for so long, the fact that he actually behaved, you know, as a real statesman, that he was able to put that to one side and actually think about, you know, what was the best thing for his country. I think that for me, really, I think is it's a great example. You know, we all have challenges in our lives. You know, we all have challenges in our lives, and we all have situations or individuals we meet that we might disagree with, and sometimes we disagree with them profoundly. But I think that, you know, what he showed was actually, as a leader, how you can actually sometimes rise above, you know, your own personal experiences. And that for me was as a random person, I think it's one of the great examples.
Oh, that's nice. So, what advice would you give to a BAME aspirant wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
I think is you know, Mahatma Gandhi said, his saying is, you know, be the change you wish to see. You know? And I think that, you know, for me, what that is, it's important you have the ambition. And the ambition is, I would say, you know, you think about reaching for the sky. Nothing is unattainable. Of course, you know, there will be challenges. Of course, you know, you need to get qualifications. And of course, you need to try and get experiences. And that isn't easy. I know in my own career, there have been times when I've applied for roles that I feel I should have got, or I felt that the person who has got that role has been less qualified than me. But what I've also done is I've decided, well, actually, it's if I haven't had the opportunity here, I've gone elsewhere. I've applied for something else. You know, I think the key thing is never to let that sense of, you know, when you have a difficult situation, never let that sense of disappointment color your thinking and that you give up. What you do is you simply try and find another route to another place, you know? And I think that that's the one thing I would say. I think believe in yourself. I think that's really important. And I think that, you know, we need to have a society in this country and elsewhere where, you know, people, the organizations, whether it's health or anything else, reflect the communities they serve. They are reflective at all levels, from top to bottom. Okay? I think equally, I think that doesn't happen, and no one should expect to have a job simply because of who they are. What you have to do is to demonstrate your capacity to do the job. And if you feel you're still not being given the opportunities, then that organization, ask yourself that question, does this organization still have the moral authority to keep me here, or should I actually be looking for opportunities elsewhere? Now, for me, that is the one thing I learned early on in my career, and I basically moved around quite a lot in terms of my career, you know. And we had a very simple rule in my family that, you know, our family, we stayed in the one spot. We've always lived in Coventry. My wife brought my children up and had a very important role as a homemaker. And my role, I think, was it gave me the confidence and the ability to be able to apply elsewhere. Now, what is really important, I think, is I also want to see a society where my granddaughters have the same opportunities as my grandsons. You know, so I think we need to ensure that inequality in its various forms is actually recognized and responded to. And I'm very pleased to see that, you know, when you look at the professions, for example, you can see in things like whether it's medicine or law or accountancy or these other things, you can see that the numbers of women students and those qualifying in those professions is actually now greater than male students. So those changes are beginning to happen. But I think that, you know, so my formula would be believe in yourself, don't be disappointed if setbacks occur. They happen for everyone, and they've certainly happened to me in my career, but actually you carry on, you should be resilient, and actually you look for opportunities elsewhere. If, on the other hand, every organization should now be thinking about how do we make the best use of the people we have working in our organization? How do we make the best use? How do we give them the training and other opportunities to develop themselves? And that's what I think is really important. And I believe the health service has got to respond to that challenge, because we need to have more people from BAME communities working in senior positions.
So looking back, who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career so far?
I've not really. I mean, the one experience I'd give you is that I've not really had a mentor or key person. What I've really had, what I've drawn on, have been the insights I've seen from my own experience in terms of my parents and their generation, because these were people who came from Indian villages. They had few qualifications, and actually they were not earning a lot of money, but they gave you that sense of security in terms of, and they gave you a real sense of insight. That's one important influence on my life. I think another important influence on my life has been that wherever I've worked, I've tried to just learn from people in terms of what people do and also what not to do. I think that, you know, it's so easy, I think, to think in terms of, well, you know, in order to develop my career, this is what I'm going to do in terms of how I behave. And I think, you know, you see both positive behaviors and you also see negative behaviors. And I think you have to learn from that and actually resolve that this is not going to be the way I'm going to conduct myself with other people. So your own personal values, I think, are very important there. And I think the third issue is actually recognizing the importance of your reputation. You know, reputations, you know, take a lifetime to build up, but you can destroy a reputation within a very short period of time by the way you act or, you know, are seen to act in a particular way. And I think that what's always very important, I think, is to think about that. You know, what am I saying? What is the impact of this going to be? Or what are the actions I'm taking? And actually, is there anything here which I'm doing which I shouldn't really be doing? And how comfortable, and if people are not aware of it generally, how comfortable would I be if this became general knowledge. So I think those are very simple rules, but those are the kind of things I would kind of say that I've observed from my interactions with people. But I've not had a real mentor. I suppose my father was my greatest mentor, if you like, but you know, my insights have come from just experiences and observations.
That's beautiful. So what's something that you're looking forward to in the future, your next steps, Karamjit?
Well, I think the thing I am looking forward to is I'm very much hoping that we can move beyond COVID-19 and think about, you know, I don't think lives are going to be the same as they were before COVID-19, but this phrase, the new normal, whatever it means, that, you know, we have an opportunity again to physically interact with each other. You know, at the moment, we're simply doing this by phone or by Zoom, as it were. I think that I really look forward to that actually happening in the not too distant future. I mean, I think at the moment I'm keeping a very short time scale. I think professionally, I would be, you know, very pleased when our hospitals are able to provide the services that our local communities normally expect to see from a hospital, and that we are not simply just dealing with COVID-19 cases.
That's nice.
The final thing I would want to kind of draw attention to is that this weekend we'll be celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the NHS. This is a unique institution providing, you know, free healthcare to all the population, and I think was clearly, you know, what we should always remember: the NHS and its values is about people. It's the people we serve, and it's the people who provide that service from within the NHS. And I'm always grateful to the support that we've had both from the communities and indeed from the people, our staff, who provide that service.
That's brilliant. I think, you know, what NHS have done to this country, I don't think that could be replicable anywhere in the world.
No, I really don't. I think it's just an amazing institution, and it's been a great privilege. It is a great privilege, you know, to actually serve as being chairman of such a special public service, actually.
So, Karamjit, is there any part of your life or career that we haven't touched that maybe we could spend the last minute on, or is there anything else you would like to share?
Well, I think the only other thing I'd say is that I've also been involved with a lot of voluntary bodies. You know, at the moment I'm a trustee of a Sikh temple in Coventry. I have been for 5 years, and this is my last year. So, you know, and that's important because, I mean, for me, you know, I was brought up in a family, you know, I'm not a baptized Sikh, but I'm clean shaven, but my parents had very strong values around that, and I've been brought up in that way. And I think that that's important to me. I've been involved with voluntary bodies. You know, I've been involved something called the Citizenship Foundation, which is about how do we inculcate the idea of being good citizens in young people. I've been on the Lloyd's TSB, the bank had a foundation which used to give out something like £30 million a year to voluntary bodies. I was a trustee on that for 6 years, you know, national trustee. I've been on the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which was a foundation commissioning a lot of work and research on social mobility and poverty, because I think that, you know, we all have a responsibility to try and make things better for everyone in society, I think. I've been involved, as I said, with organizing these medical camps in India. So for me, voluntary work or voluntary activity is also important. You know, we all should be trying to do something in our lives to to make society better. So, in addition to my career, that strand has also been very important for me.
That's nice. So, Karamjit, I'm sure we could go for another 30 minutes, but considering the time, we'll close it here. So, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real privilege to have you with me at Baachu Talk. I wish you, your Leicester team, all your voluntary work that you do, everybody who you touch in the life, all the good health and happiness. Please continue to inspire everyone around you. Stay safe, stay healthy, Karamjit, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Well, and thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karamjit. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this very special NHS birthday Baachu Talk with Karamjit Singh, CBE. You all owe a debt of gratitude to the nurses, the doctors, the physios, the porters, the cleaners, and the countless others who have delivered for our patients and their families, along with all those in the NHS and social care sectors. Please join me to just say thank you, NHS, and to everyone. And please make sure you celebrate 5th of July for our NHS birthday. So please to visit www.baachu.com/Baachu Talk podcast, where you will not only find this special episode with Karamjit Singh, CBE, but you'll also find many more leadership stories there. So don't forget to subscribe, review, and share Baachu Talk podcast, powered by Baachu, trusted advisor to the government. We will see you at the next episode with another special guest. Until then, it's Bhaskar Sundaram signing off. Take care.